Many years ago, a famous explorer, Sir Francis Drake, was going to set out on a great exploration. He was trying to find a crew to go with him. So he got up, said to a group of people, he says, "Here's what I'll promise you if you go with me on this exploration. You'll see some of the most wonderful, wonderful things your eyes can ever behold. You'll see some of the most beautiful white sandy beaches. You'll meet exotic people to all the places that we go. You'll meet and see all kinds of food that is just incredible and refreshing to your soul." He said, "We will find all kinds of jewels and rewards of all types if you'd go with me on this journey." But not one person signed up. He was kind of discouraged about trying to get a crew to go on this exploration. So the next day he had a different crew of people come, and this is what he changed and said. "If you sign up and go with me on this trip, that we will encounter storms that will terrify you to tears, tiger winds that will hammer them and blow them off course for months. Water would frequently be scarce, and at times we'll be so thirsty our very souls would cry out for a drop of water. In short, the danger will always be constant. It will be a companion to us." He concluded by declaring that if they could handle these things, the joys of the exploration would exceed their wildest dreams. And every single person signed up. In fact, some of them were so excited to go, they didn't want to go back home and say goodbye to their family. They boarded the ship. Isn't that amazing how you challenge people with courage? And when we've been looking at Nehemiah, this is what Nehemiah had to do. He had a dream that he wanted to rebuild Jerusalem because it had been destroyed. And as we looked last week in Nehemiah, he said, if you can imagine the walls of this building looking like piles of rubble. I saw the other day where a guy had a track hoe and tore a house down. And I guess getting it ready to load in the back of trucks and haul it off. If you can imagine this building looking like that, and someone saying, "Listen, I have a dream. We're going to take all this rubble and we're going to build it over again. We're going to go through all the rubble and we're going to build it with what we got." Some of you would look at him and think, "Man, I think you're crazy. We can't do this." And Nehemiah knew the obstacles that he was going to face. He knew that there would be some people not willing to do this. It was a dream he had, and God had already been working through his dream. One of the things I always tell people is when you're wanting to do something for God, look through it and compare it to the Bible and see God in it and see if God will support it. And Nehemiah knew that because he shared his dream with the king, and the king was supporting his dream, a worldly man. And not only that, he was going to give him money, give him security, give him support. It was beyond his wildest dreams. Sometimes when we think that if we're going to do something for God, just how is this going to take place? Well, you're never going to know. You're never going to know until you put your feet in the water and see them part and you walk across on dry ground. But if you don't put your feet in the water, you'll never know. So many of us, we say, "God, if you'll show me, I will go." God's not that way. He's saying, "Hey, listen, if you go, I'll show you on the way." And so many of us are difficult to follow God in that way, to accept challenges. But 8 years ago, I told people that in order to build a new church, this is something I've never done. I've been a part of committees that built churches, but I was never the minister of the church that was deeply involved in building a church from nothing. And it was an incredible challenge for my life. I remember one day, Becky Lyons, I needed a place in town to meet with people, so Becky had the real estate office, had a little room back there, and she loaned me that so I could have an office in town. And great, it's right across the street from the bar. You know? And so I thought to myself, I've lost my mind. What am I doing here? What have I done to myself? What have I got myself involved in? And I'm sure there were moments with Nehemiah, with his dream that he wanted to rebuild Jerusalem, that he was, you know, every dreamer has been misunderstood. And there's no statue ever erected for anybody that left well enough alone. I mean, they did amazing things. And someone has to stick their neck out and say, this is what we're going to pursue. And it's powerful when you think about it. When you look in verse 11 through 16, I went to Jerusalem, and after staying there 3 nights, I set out during the night with a few men. I had not told anybody what God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. There were no mounts with me except the one I was riding on. And he knew, if I share this dream with him right now, they're like, you're crazy. You're a crazy man. You can't do this. By night I went through the valley gate toward the Jackal Well and the Dung Gate, examining the walls of Jerusalem, which had been broken down, its gates which had been destroyed by fire. And then I moved on toward the Fountain Gate and the King's Pool, but there was not enough room for my mount to get through. So I went up to the valley by night, examining the wall. Finally I turned back and re-entered through the valley gate. The officials did not know where I'd gone or what I was doing, because as yet I had said nothing to the Jews or the priests or nobles or officials or any others who would be doing the work. Sometimes you've just got to examine the rubble. Sometimes you've just got to count the cost. And so he's going to examine the task. God had put a dream in his heart, and he knew that it was going to take a miracle from God for this to happen. I mean, it's one thing to have all, I'm going to tell you what, if you get all the supplies to build this building, there's a lot of you men in here that can build it, but I'm not one of them. I am not a builder. It would be crooked beyond belief. Oh, I could get it up, but it would not be pretty. But some of you are much better at that with your skill level than I am. Outdoor things, much better at, but not putting up buildings for me. Let alone having all the new products to work with. But having rubble to sort through and say, let's take this rock and put it here, and let's take this board and put it here, or let's go get new lumber and cut and make new gates. And he is examining what he's facing. His dream became reality, because remember, when he had the dream last week, he hadn't been there yet. It's one thing for us to pray about the people in Houston or Florida, but when you go there, your jaw drops. Like, wow, we've been praying for these people, but I hadn't been here and seen what happened to them. It's different. And he's walking around thinking. But I remember Walt Woodard, one of the great world champion team ropers, he always said in an article that I read, he said, I appreciate men and women of courage. They're what build America. To the weak-willed people that walk away and say, I can't do this, they don't get anything done. But he said, I love men and women of courage that have the guts to stand up and everybody call them crazy. Because those are the people that built America. Our schools, our streets, our buildings are named after those people. And other people didn't believe in them in their dreams. You can't do this. It can't be done. But they believed in their heart that it could be with the will of God. Because I remember the man that started the CIY, the Christ in Youth, was a friend of mine. I asked him one time backstage how it got started. Bob Stacy said to me, he said, some men dream dreams and they die in their dreaming. He said other men dream dreams and they place them in the hands of God and they watch them turn into a reality. Dreams that never become a reality are just wishful thinking. It takes courage for a person to stand up and be different. For someone to stand up and want to achieve a goal where everybody is looking at you thinking, this can't be done. And I agree, but with God, it can be true because he majors in the impossible. And that's what changes people's lives. That's what changes people's lives. Man, when you look at verses 17 through 18, he said, then I said to them, you see the trouble we are in? Jerusalem lies in ruins. And I'm going to tell you, this was a pretty good-sized city. This wasn't just a little bitty town. And its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace. See, he saw it a little differently than other people do. It became personal to him. This is my hometown. Remember what Daniel was talking about? There's, Will Rogers said everybody has a little burg that they love down in there somewhere. There's that special little place. Nehemiah loved Jerusalem. It bothered him that God's holy city lied in ruins. We have been disgraced. This place, he said, belongs to God. And it's been destroyed. And we need to rebuild it, not for me, but for God. He had a different motivating factor in his life. I also told them about the gracious hand of my God upon me and what the king had said to me. He also shares with them what had taken place. Ever since that you all had the dream to start this church, there has never been a project that we have ever started that God hasn't helped us finish. There hasn't been a prayer on a project yet in 8 years that God hasn't answered with a yes answer. I would say that's a pretty good record. You ought to look at that and think, when someone says, oh, we can't do this, what do you mean we can't do it? Look at our record. I think God has been right there all the way. Yeah, we might have doubted it. Yeah, we might have thought it was nuts. But you know what? Because here's the deal, and I say this all the time, and I believe it. In spite of my shortcomings, in spite of my weaknesses, and in spite of yours, God is still doing a good work here. I've tried to mess it up. And God's like, Mike, would you get out of the way? I'm trying to do some good things there. And it's going to happen whether you're there or not. And once in a while, I'm amazed. I have to remind myself that this is not about me or you. It's about God and what he wants to do in people's lives. There's people's lives that have incredible needs. They need God in their life every day. And if we can point them in that direction, or these young people that come to our church as they grow up in a community and learn to love God and raise their families and learn to love God, you had a part in that. And people look back 100 years from now, if the Lord hadn't come back yet, like, who were the people that started this church that I go to? You're the people. You had a dream and a goal to do something awesome. I mean, you should be really proud of that. You shouldn't just pat yourself on the back all the time, but you should thank the Lord that you trusted the Lord like Nehemiah. Because when you examine what we had to work with to do this, it got done. And you know what they said when he told them and he articulated his dream and he shared his dream with them? God was working again. They said, well, then let's start getting to it. And they began a good work. If God's working with you, Nehemiah, so they saw something in him that here's a guy that loves the Lord. And the guy had a dangerous job. Remember what I told you last week? What did he do for a living? Some of you may not have been here. What did Nehemiah do for a living? He was a cupbearer. And what did a cupbearer do? Before the king drinks anything, you drink it. If you die, he doesn't drink it. You eat his food. If you die, the king doesn't eat it. That was his job. Every day of his life, he had to have courage like, Lord, please be with me today. This might be the end of my life. Every day he had to live that way. What an amazing job. And maybe that's why God picked Nehemiah to be his leader. Here's a guy that's got courage. Look what he does in his everyday job. That would be something incredible. Man, when you go and look at the tornado damage and the hurricane damage and the bombings from terrorists, and you get in there, and I'm going to tell you what, you're going to have a sore back at the end of the day. Because before you can build anything new, you got to pick up all the rubble that's there. And that is not an easy job, even if you got equipment. Cleaning up the mess and all the damage and all the heartache of watching it and seeing all the hours of time that must have went into something that is now destroyed to get it just so that now you can start rebuilding something else. Nehemiah was going to have to use the material that he had there. So he shares with them that dream. But you know what? Even after they assessed it all and looked at all of it, just like the men that went on the exploration, they weren't scared away. They said, then let's get it done. Well, you got to appreciate their courage. You got to appreciate the fact, because this is going to be a daunting task for them. I mean, Jerusalem was not a small place. And the walls were huge. And the gates were huge. This was a huge place. And as we go on into this, they were going to work with a weapon in one hand and a Bible in the other to get their work done. Because they had enemies that wanted to kill them, not only chase their dreams. And they still wanted to accept the task. But when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite and Geshem the Arab heard about it, they mocked and ridiculed us. What is this that you are doing? They asked, are you rebelling against the king? I answered them by saying, the God of heaven will give us success. We are his servants. We'll start rebuilding. But as for you, you have no share in Jerusalem or any claim to his historic right. There always has to be somebody that doesn't want to let us fulfill our dreams. There always has to be somebody that pours cold water on our dreams. You know how we learn to be the people we are? By the people who teach us. God forgive any adult who ever pours cold water on kids' dreams when they say to you, this is what I'm going to do. Because I could start sharing with you a list that goes on thousands of people, from Johnny Bench, who walked around his junior high saying, I'm going to be the greatest catcher in the world. And people made fun of him, and Johnny Bench was the greatest catcher in the world when it was all said and done. Now he does Blue Emu commercials for arthritis pain. But you could go on and on of people that made fun of people who had dreams. And yet their dreams became a reality in their lives because they believed in their heart and they worked with God to achieve those dreams. I know that you could say, hey, we don't have enough money to do what we're doing. I've heard that before. And there's times I probably agree. But I was taught by a man years ago. He was a man that had an asphalt business. And he was one of the elders in my church. And when the men in the church would start arguing in a board meeting about not having the money to do something for God's work, I remember he would always stand up, and Paul would stand up and say, guys, if we have all the money to do it, that's not faith. That's just taking the money we have and doing it. There's no faith in that. He said faith is stepping out when we don't have the money and believing that God will supply it to get the job done. And he would sit down and everybody, you know, good point. We are Christian men. We aren't just a group of men. We are Christian men doing a work for God that is spiritual, and we need to be reminded of that we are to be men of faith. And you know what? You have stepped out in faith, and God has blessed us time and time and time again. I'm going to tell you what, to be a part of a church like this, we probably should have just gave out work gloves to everybody that joined. Because we have funny phrases. Someone just did it this morning around here. You know, like, hey, who does this? That would be you. Thanks for volunteering. So a lot of people have learned. I remember Fane, when we were at first meetings and had meetings all the time, Fane would do that, and he never says that anymore. It's like, because like, that would be you. There is no one that does that. Thank you for volunteering. No, I wouldn't, like, well, we don't have janitors that come and clean up where you sit. People in our church volunteer to do that. We don't have people that come and fix messes. That would be you coming and fixing the mess. Or people volunteering to do that. Or any of the things going. There were times here, all these chairs, we would tear them down after church on Sunday, store them, cover them, seal the door. Then this place would be concrete dust and sawdust. Then on Saturday, we'd try to sweep it out to the corners, bring the chairs out, set them. I mean, that was our routine for quite a while, for a long time. I told everybody it's kind of an oblique workout. If you do enough of them one side, then start doing them to the other side. Because when you stack these 8 high and do it a bunch of times, you're getting an oblique workout in, week after week on a Saturday. And you could go on and on about people that volunteer to do things here, that people that volunteer to mow our yards, and people that get communion ready, and people that get the music ready, and we're, just going on. This is something that we just shared the dream, and people wanted to be a part of the dream. This is not a finished church. In a lot of ways, like a lot of churches, we're very unfinished. But I'm going to tell you what, I think it's a really good thing that we are doing for God here. It's interesting that when the doubters ridiculed Nehemiah, what did he say? God's going to give us success. You might as well get out of our way. God's behind this. You're not going to win. Remember what God told Joshua? God will give you success in whatever you do if you follow him with all your heart. It might seem huge, but the greater the risk, the greater the reward. Critics are going to stand in your way whenever you want to do something. They're going to doubt. I mean, I remember a story in the New Testament where a group of guys are in a boat and Jesus was walking on water. I don't see guys walking all on water, but none of them got out but Peter. And he believed that he could walk on water with Jesus. And you know what? He did. And when did he start to sink? When he doubted. If he had believed, he could have walked right over to him. In our world, when someone tries to do something, there's always somebody standing back mocking, or you can't do this, or I don't believe that you could achieve this, or whatever. I read a story years ago about a football team where a guy was struggling to catch passes. Coach still believed in this person, but man, he had fumbleitis, and he just couldn't catch a pass to save his life. but he was listening to all the criticism he received all the time. Finally, he started praising him, telling him how good he was, how talented he was, and he said he started catching every pass because he was willing to praise him instead of criticizing. You know, it's an amazing thing in our world. There's always going to be doubters when we want to do something good. I don't like it when people criticize me. I don't think you like it when people criticize you. But if I'm doing what I'm doing for God, and I know from the Word of God it's what God wants, then I can handle every bit of what they bring. And Nehemiah said in the text, I'm going to have success because God is a part of this. Now what you need to remember is always make sure that it's bathed in that this is something that God is going to support. Okay? If you know that this is what God wants, then go for it with all your heart. If I was someone being a part of your group, and I am being the minister, I would say that God has given you some real blessings over the years. I think when people started meeting in a living room to have church, and I heard about some of the church services you guys had when you started, you know, 50 people in somebody's house having church is quite a crowd. Meeting in people's garages. But you had a dream. You had a goal. You know, some people, they've already forgot about that dream. They don't even want to be a part of it anymore, like running a race. But then other people, they have that stick-to-itiveness. They have that courage. They have that will inside of them to want to achieve. It's those kind of people that build things in our world that we look at and think, wow, that's incredible what that person did. But man, they put a lot of effort in it with God's help. And you've done that. There's been a lot of lives touched. I'm blessed by the people that come here and by the lives that have been touched by the people that come here. There's real blessings. And sometimes I'll share with you kind of a funny story. And it's coming up this year, and I sometimes get so caught up in what we're doing, I don't notice our church is so different until you do a wedding here. We don't have a lot of carpet anywhere for a beautiful white wedding gown. And I start noticing, like, oh boy, you know, like, we are a little rough around the edges. you know, and there are things that, but you know what? I have thoroughly enjoyed this journey with God. It's been good for me, because I think sometimes in our lives we can become stagnant spiritually, and we can be on a journey with God that we just think, I'm ready to pull over and retire and park and I'm done, let somebody else do it. And building a new church is not something that you can do that with. It's something that is a very constant thing. It's constant with all of our effort, all of our elbow grease, all of our funds. I mean, but you know what? There's been some incredible blessings in this church to a lot of people's lives. And I hope that you really enjoy that, because what you've done in this pursuit to do this and to keep doing it now next door. And I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to score a couple points here. Kind of like you, Joni. I mean, Joni went to a garage sale today and bought her husband a gun and didn't even tell her. I mean, until he got home, he didn't know his wife bought him a gun. And it's a good gun. You know, I know what you guys are thinking. No, she did really good. I mean, she scored major points. I mean, Cindy has never bought me a gun. And if she did, I would think, oh my, I mean, I'm trying to be nice, but what is it? You know? And, you know, I'm going to score some points here with the Sunday school teachers. Our teachers have worked hard here in crazy conditions. Do you know where our first Sunday school classes were? We met downtown at the Edge, and we decided we wanted to have junior church. We decided we wanted to have a praise band. We decided we wanted to start youth hour in Sunday school. You know, my Sunday school class was in Curtis's barber shop. One of the youth Sunday school class was in DT Metal Masters. And one of the other classes was in the abstract office on the other block. Then we would come back down the road to the church. Isn't that crazy? My dad would have loved it because he was a barber, and I had my first Sunday school class in a barber shop on Sunday because we were trying to find room to go have our classes. That's crazy what you guys have done. And you know what? Next door, our teachers deserve brand new classrooms. Because if you haven't taught Sunday school in the trailers, they deserve brand new classrooms. And I'm looking forward to the joy on their face when they have great classrooms for our kids to be in, to enjoy being taught the Word of God. And to all the women here, in this new building next door, we're building great, big bathrooms. That the door faces the right way, and also there will be counters where you can lay your things. And you deserve that. But you know, when we first did things, it was a lot different than now. I'm excited about what God's doing in your lives and in the church. But what's more important to me than buildings is people. Years ago, someone asked me as a youth minister, when I look in your Sunday school class, what do you do with all those kids in there? And I said, well, you know, I'm really not concerned about the numbers that are in there. What I'm concerned about is how they turn out 20 years from now. And do they still go to church? Do they still love the Lord? Do they still read their Bibles? Do they live as Christian men and women in their family, in their community, at work? That's what matters more to me than a building. That's what matters more to me than numbers in a group. What are they learning? How are they growing? What are they going to achieve for the future of their life? That's way more important to me. And if you've noticed, I never put numbers in the church paper. I don't do that for a reason, because when I first got in the ministry, it turned my stomach. You go to a minister's convention, first thing two preachers do to each other, hey, good to see you. How many people go to your church? Does that really matter? Like, you have more testosterone in me if you have 300 and I have 200? I mean, is that what we're measuring ourselves on? On how many go? Let me ask you this. How many of your people are ignorant, and how many of them know the Bible? Well, isn't that just about as good a question? Let's get over the number thing. What do they know? What are they learning? Are they still going to go to church 30 years from now? And when I go home to churches where I've been, and I see young couples where they used to be in junior church, and now they're married to a Christian, and their kids are going to church, and they're teaching Sunday school, and they're being youth sponsors, and they're elders and deacons, gosh, that's just about the greatest thing I could ever be rewarded with. Because that's what we always wanted out of their lives, for them to have a wonderful Christian life. That was the goal. This morning, praise team's going to come. We've entered in on a dream. You know, if you're going to be a part of a church like this, you got to buy into the dream. When I talked to Jason about being our youth minister, I said, you know, here's the deal. There's a lot of things, but there's a lot of things we're not. You've seen where Jason's office is. You've got to buy into the dream to want to work here. You've got to put up with things that, you know, that you might not have to put up with in other places. But yet, on the other hand, we're not done yet. And God's not finished with us yet. We're still wanting to do things for God and meet needs in our community. And I hope that you are too. A mature church is a church that meets the needs of the people within its community. And we live in a community where some people's lives are in ruins. And to rebuild their lives will take a dream like Nehemiah had. We live in a community where some of the things that we're facing in our lives, they've been destructed, and they got to be rebuilt. And it will take a dream like what Nehemiah had to do it. And you know what? Some people said that it would take a miracle for God for some of you to ever go to church, and there you sit. So, Nehemiah was a courageous man who had a powerful dream to be successful for God, and we can do that same thing in our church today. And if you want to be a part of that or change your life in any way, feel free to come forward and stand and sing.